You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 206. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you? If you are listening to this episode in real time, that means that we have officially reached July. We are halfway through 2023. What in the actual world? So, as I was thinking about this yesterday, I started reflecting back on the last 6 months. I was thinking about all of the different things that have happened, what's been going on in my life. And I found this moment of pause to be really powerful. In fact, it's what inspired me to put together today's episode about how to do this mid-year review. Because I think that, while it can seem overwhelming or maybe not the first thing that you'd have on your to-do list, I'm telling you, it's key. When we make the space to pause and to take a breath and to think back over the past 6 months, we end up creating so many opportunities for powerful shifts and realizations as we move forward. And as a side note, if you're listening to this episode outside of real time and it's not July, you can still absolutely use this episode as a guide to review your current situation wherever you are at in regard to the year. Okay, so whether you're listening to this in July or it's September or it's March 2 years from now, do yourself a favor and keep listening. So before we dive into the actual review process, let's first talk about why. We hear people talk about the power of reflection and why reflection is so important all the time. I mean, you've probably heard me talk about making time for reflection a lot on the podcast. I talk about it frequently. But why? Why is this so important? Why is it so impactful? Well, as I mentioned, I think just in last week's episode 205, often when our ADHD brains better understand the why behind the task or the project or the habit, we have an easier time following through on the thing than if we were just arbitrarily told to do something without any kind of explanation or justification for it. So when we can better understand that why, we usually have a better buy-in. Okay, so with that in mind, why is it important for us to make space for this reflection? Well, first of all, it helps us build awareness. And as you've heard me say on this podcast, awareness is everything. When we create awareness of where we're at, it is frankly the most important step in moving forward in either creating the changes you want to see in your life or to further fuel the direction in which you're already headed. For example, if you make space for this reflection, it can help you either realize, oh, I guess I didn't realize I was spending so much time in this area. I think I want to make an adjustment now that I see that. Or on the other side, fantastic. I wanted to get the whole house decluttered and organized by the end of this year, and I'm halfway through and we're halfway through the year. My approach is working well. Great. What can I learn from that? When we pause and we take stock of where we're at, we really gain valuable insight into our progress, into our strengths, into what's working and what we enjoy and how we can make more of the things that are going well. It's a little bit like checking where you are on a map when you're halfway through your journey. So for example, when I first moved into my new house and I started taking Bruno on different walks around the neighborhood, I didn't know where I was, right? So before I would leave for a walk, I would open up Google Maps and I would kind of map out a different loop for us to walk on together. Okay. Now, for some of you, that might be all you need to complete your walk. You look at the map and you look at your loop and you go, okay, let's go. If that is you, good on you. My direction is terrible. Do not tell me to go south for a mile and then turn east. I don't know what that means. Give me a landmark. So anyway, sometimes on my walks, I had looked at the loop ahead of time, but then I'd be walking. I get worried that maybe I turned down the wrong street, or maybe I took a right instead of taking a left when I was supposed to, like I planned originally. So when that happens, I'll pull out my phone and I'll open up Google Maps just to see where my little dot is on the map in relation to, where I wanted to be on our walk. And by doing this, By doing this quick check-in, I then have awareness of where I'm at on my walk so I can make an adjustment should I need to. So the mid-year reflection is a little bit like that. It's this easy yet impactful way to quickly check in and ask yourselves, okay, where am I at right now on my journey? Do I want to make any adjustments? Do I want to turn down a new path? There are no right or wrong answers here, but doing this check-in is really powerful because it's giving us that valuable awareness of where we are. Now, additionally, as we'll talk about a little bit more later in the episode, I really love creating these intentional check-ins as well because they provide us with this beautiful opportunity to recognize all of our wins, both big and small. And when we make space to recognize these wins, we ultimately help fuel our progress. We ultimately help give ourselves this extra boost of motivation, especially when we're about halfway through the year. Okay? Because when we're halfway through something, it can often feel really messy. I actually have a podcast episode, I'll link to it in the show notes, but it's all about the messy middle, right? It's that uncomfortable period when we are in the middle of a goal or an experience or a journey and things get, as the name suggests, very messy. When this happens, it doesn't mean something's gone wrong. It just means we're in that part of the journey. We're in the messy middle. But when we're in that messy middle, if we don't know that that exists, and if we're not intentionally recognizing our wins and seeing our growth along the way, it can get really easy to get down on ourselves, right? It can be easy to throw in the towel because we're feeling so discouraged from telling ourselves, oh, I should be farther along. This isn't working, right? There's actually this quote that I love. I came across it. It's from Rosabeth Moss Cantor. And there's an article in the Harvard Business Review where she says, quote, everything looks like a failure in the middle. And I just love this quote so much. Everything looks like a failure in the middle. And I love it because I think she's so spot on. And when we have awareness of that truth, that everything feels like a failure in the middle, and we also pause to assess what's working and we track our wins, right? When we put that together, it helps us keep moving through the messy middle to get to the other side. Because we don't throw in the towel. We know that this is part of the process, okay? Now, again, I also want to acknowledge that making time for these types of mid-year reviews or reflections, they can also seem challenging, right? Particularly for those of us with an ADHD brain. We might find ourselves being overly critical of ourselves, thinking we should be farther along. We should have already achieved XYZ, or we've fallen off the wagon, even though there is no wagon ever. But as humans generally, we do have that negativity bias where it's easier for our brain to kind of focus on what's gone wrong or where we've fallen short. And since as ADHDers, we likely have even more stories and even more evidence that, we don't follow through or we're so far behind, it is easier for us to kind of fall into that pattern of thinking, right? It's not the first time we've thought that. So if your brain offers thoughts like this, and if you're feeling that resistance to getting started, I invite you to consider how the opposite might also be true, okay? How might it be true that because it's so easy for our brain to focus on the negative, it might actually be even more important for us to intentionally slow down and recognize those wins, right? Now, additionally, as ADHD brains, we do tend to struggle with our short-term working memory. And because of this, when we ask ourselves to kind of think back and reflect on our wins and learn from what went well, it's actually more challenging for our brain. It's harder for us to remember some of these past events and some of these past experiences. It might be harder for us than a neurotypical brain, for example. Now, again, having awareness of this, right, the fact that it is an obstacle is really important. Because when we know that it's a little bit more challenging for our brain, we can go slowly, right? We can come to the reflection from a place of compassion And we can also put supports in place to help alleviate some of that demand on our executive functions and make it a little bit easier for us to remember these different moments, right? So we can go in with compassion and we can go in with some extra supports. Now, additionally, for my fellow perfectionists and recovering perfectionists out there, I know you are listening, we can also remind ourselves that this review does not have to be perfect. We do not have to account for every single event that's happened over the last 6 months, okay? So hold this process loosely. And if you make the time to explore the questions in any capacity, you're doing it right. Whatever you remember is enough, okay? So with all of that in mind, let's talk about a couple of different ways that you can help jog your memory a bit, right? So if you're having a hard time remembering back to January or something, how can you jog your memory a little bit so you can start seeing those wins and finding those successes over the past 6 months? Well, one of the most straightforward approaches that I think can be really effective to help us jog our memory is to review your planner or your calendar. Okay, so flip back through the pages, scroll through the digital pages, whatever you have, and remind yourself of what went on. And if you have weeks or months where there's literally nothing written in your planner, no problem. Okay, we're just mining for what's there. So look at the events, the milestones, the birthdays, travel dates, conferences, deadlines, right? Look for what you can find in your planner or your calendar. Another favorite of mine is to go back through my phone's photo album. You know, our phones have essentially become these virtual time capsules, and they're such a great way to help us recall these literal snapshots of our lives. So scrolling through your camera roll can really be another quick and easy way to help you remember these moments that brought you so much joy or that made you laugh or that offered inspiration or whatever it is. Okay? You could also review different emails or text messages. You know, sometimes the conversations that we have with people in our lives can also help us recall these important projects or events or celebrations, things like that. Okay, so texts and emails, that can also be a really effective way to jog our memory. Similarly, you could check your social media feed. You know, if you are frequently a person who posts online, just like our phone's photo album, you know, many of us use our social media platforms as this way to kind of log our digital lives. So you can scroll through those old posts, through comments, through memories you've been tagged in, and use those to help you recall the highlights and the milestones and the different experiences that you've had, again, over the last 6 months. Now, you could also, if you're a person who journals, page back through your journal and find those memories, find those key points. You could also think about key holidays or, you know, recurring events that happen every year, and then use that as a starting point to help you recall what's happened this year specifically. For example, you know, you have your birthday every year, so you could think, okay, what happened on my birthday this year? What went on, right? Or what did I do for spring break this year? Did we travel? Did we stay home? What was going on this year? And using these kind of recurring holidays and events, but then using it as a place to ground yourself to remember the specifics of this year can be a helpful approach. And then finally, the last one I want to offer is to just check in with the people in your life. You know, you can ask your friends or your colleagues, your family, your partner. Depending on who you're talking to, you might even share the project with them. You know, you might say, I'm doing this mid-year review and I'm trying to remember some key points over the last 6 months. Is there anything that stands out to you? What would you say? Or I'm trying to think about what happened over the last 6 months, but I'm coming up short with February. Can you think of anything that happened in February? Sometimes just having these short conversations can quickly jog your memory and then unlock a whole bunch of different experiences really quickly. So, if your short-term memory is anything like mine, I know it can feel really challenging to kind of recall these past events, but hopefully a few of these different strategies that I just offered will help you jog your memory and then more easily recall some of these key dates to help inform this mid-year review that we're going to do together, okay? And then I want to remind us one more time. First, tell your perfectionist brain that they can take the day off. They don't need to come into work today. And then second, please remember that the purpose of this mid-year review is to focus on what's going well. Again, as ADHD brains, we really want to be intentional about this review process. So please make sure that you're using it for you. Use the questions in a way that fuel you and that encourage you. And if you notice your brain is trying to spin the questions and you're starting to feel discouraged or something, take a step back, ground yourself in your growth, ground yourself in what's going well, ground yourself in the successes. Okay, I promise you they are there. All right, let's talk about this review. So my process includes 3 different steps. And then within each of these steps, I'm going to offer you a couple of different questions to consider. Okay, so I'm going to talk through the questions and give some examples on the episode today. But I highly, highly encourage you to set aside time to do this review on your own. Okay, don't just listen to me talk through some examples. Really pause and identify some of your own. I actually grappled with turning this episode into a walking meditation like I have in the past, but since I wanted to share so many tips ahead of time, I decided not to. Now, with that said, I did create a workbook with each of the different prompts so that you can download it and work through the questions on your own time. And you can get that workbook through the link in the show notes. So do yourself a favor, open up your podcast app and then tap the link in the show notes so you can grab those journaling prompts. You can download them right there so they're waiting for you in your inbox when you're ready to sit down and dive in, later today or whenever you have the space over the next few weeks. Okay. So again, head to the link in the show notes, or you can go to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/podcast and click on episode 206 and you'll be able to download the questions right there as well. All right. Let's get started with part 1, which is to remember what went well. Okay. So part 1 of our mid-year review is to step back and reflect on what has gone really well over the past 6 months. And if you, again, have a planner or your camera roll in front of you, I encourage you to go month by month and really highlight those key takeaways. Because by simply setting aside time for this one question, what went well, you're going to have such a stronger understanding of all of your wins and all of your successes that are often so easy to overlook when we're so busy going from thing to thing in our daily lives. Now, if you're doing this review in real time, right, and it's July right now, I encourage you to start by thinking back to January, the beginning of the year. What are the moments that brought a smile to your face? What stands out to you? What was something that you achieved? What was something that surprised you? What was something you tried? What went well? And then continue asking yourself similar questions for each month. What stood out in February? How about in March? How about in April? Take a moment to reflect and write down what went well during each month. And again, this can be both big and small things. It can be significant events or what might be seemingly small blips in the grand scheme of things, but they stand out to you. For example, when I was doing this for myself and I was reflecting on what went well, February generally stood out to me as this important month because it was one of the first months that I can remember in my adult life when I intentionally didn't work on the weekends. I mean, sure, there were times in the past when I, intentionally didn't work for maybe one weekend, or maybe things were really busy in my personal life or I was traveling or something, so I didn't get around to working. But this February was literally the first month I can remember where I intentionally paused on work, even though there was work I could do, to make space for play and for rest. And this might seem like a really small blip to someone else, but for me, it was incredibly significant. So as you go through each month, ask yourself, what went well, big or small? What am I celebrating? And think about the things at home. Think about things at work, in your relationships, in your personal growth, your ADHD journey. What's gone well over the past 6 months? And then building on this in part 1, I also encourage you to ask yourself, what am I really proud of? Now, I know this one might seem similar to what went well, but I think there's an important distinction here. For example, I know in my life, there are times when things don't actually go quote unquote well or quote unquote according to plan, but I still feel really proud of how I showed up. For example, I think I shared on a podcast back in January sometime that I ended up completely overscheduling myself. I mean, I was past capacity. It was not according to plan. But at the same time, I was proud of myself for saying no to some things, for really prioritizing what mattered, and essentially diving in and making things happen despite not following the anticipated timeline perfectly or at all. But for me, even though things didn't go according to plan, I was really proud of how I showed up. So what about you? What are you really proud of over the last 6 months? What are you proud of in January, in February, in March? When are you thinking to yourself, heck yeah, past self, way to show up, way to lean into your values, way to do what you thought was right at that time? I encourage you to identify these moments because each one matters. Each one deserves recognition. So let's find that so we can fuel our momentum forward. Now, that brings us into part 2 of the review process. And so again, part 1 was all about remembering our wins, acknowledging what we feel proud of. Part 2 focuses on what we can learn. Now, again, I have some intentional questions here to really help us create a supportive and empowering review. And with that in mind, I first encourage you to ask yourself the question, what has been especially fun over the last 6 months? And what can I learn from that? Now, of course, everybody's definition of fun is going to be different, but make some time for this question. What has been really fun for you over the past 6 months? What were you doing for fun in March? What about April? What hobbies were you exploring? What events did you attend? What was going on at work? Did you have any particular projects with your team that really lit you up? Did you travel? What did you love about that? Was there a particular genre of book that was super fun to read? You just couldn't put it down. Make some space for yourself to identify what has been super fun over the past 6 months, because when you do this, you're helping your brain recognize and learn what it likes to do for fun, which, quite frankly, is one of the most common recurring things I hear from clients. I have no idea what I like to do for fun. I don't know how to have fun. I haven't had time to have fun. I haven't had fun in so long, right? Let's solve for this. What has been super fun for you over the past 6 months? And what can we learn from it? What made that fun? Why was it so fun for you? And how can we implement that going forward? Now, another question that you can ask yourself along these same lines is, what has been a really powerful creative outlet for you? Have there been any projects or interactions or experiences that really got your creative juices flowing? And what can we learn from those experiences? You can also ask yourself about important connections or interactions that you've had with people over the past 6 months. Who did you connect with? And why did you enjoy those specific interactions so much? What makes those stand out? And what can we learn from them? Do you see any themes standing out here? And then a final question that you can ask yourself within part 2 of our review process. Again, remember, part 2 is all about what we can learn, is to ask yourself, what are the things that have either fueled you or recharged you? What helps you feel like yourself over the past 6 months? Have you loved taking a particular class each week? Or maybe you've been creating space in your day for journaling and meditation. You noticed that in April, that was feeling really good for you. Or maybe it's been spending time outside in nature the last couple of months as it's gotten warmer. That's felt really good, right? What's helping you show up in the way that you want to? What allows you to recharge after a busy day or a busy week when you're feeling particularly drained? What activities help you relax? What activities help you unwind? What helps you feel inspired and driven? Are they the same? Are they different? What can we learn from that? Again, think back over the last 6 months, scroll through your photos, look at your journal, review your social media feed. What do you find there? And as I'm saying this, I'm just thinking, if you're using your social media feed to help jog your memory for any of these questions, I also suggest, setting your time timer or using an alarm on your phone, because as we are all well aware, our social feeds can be huge rabbit holes for all of us to fall down and completely forget about the review process altogether. So do set a timer if you're using your social to jog your memory. Okay. So we've looked back over the past 6 months and we've remembered our wins. We've identified what we're proud of. And we've also made space to learn from what's fun and what recharges us, what fuels us, what helps us continue showing up to the different areas of our lives in the way that we want to. Well, part 3 of our review process is all about assessing what we've uncovered in these first 2 parts and choosing our next steps forward. So you've made the time to identify what works well for you. So now what we get to do is figure out how to incorporate more of that, more of what we've learned into our lives for the next 6 months. And in order to do this, I love to ask myself 3 simple yet incredibly powerful questions. Okay. So question number 1 is this: what do I want more of in my life over the next 6 months? Again, you've just uncovered so much gold in your reflection process. You've seen your wins and your successes. You've made space to feel proud of yourself. You've uncovered what lights you up and what recharges you, what provides you with that creative release, and what you find to be so much fun. Now, you get to ask yourself, what do I want more of? Maybe you want more time to explore that new hobby you discovered in May. Maybe you want more time to be with your friends because you found that it actually felt so good. You felt so recharged when you carved out those evenings to spend together over the past 6 months. And so you want more of that now. Maybe you want more time on your back deck in the early morning with your coffee because it helps you feel really grounded and centered before you begin your day. Give yourself that space to sit with this question. What do you want more of and why? And then we're going to look to the other side with our next question. What do you want less of over the next 6 months? And this could be less because you just genuinely don't want to do it as much. It's not super enjoyable for you. Or it might be less simply because you need a break from it. For example, when I thought about this question of what do I want less of, the answer that came to me immediately was I want less on my plate for the next little while. Between selling my house and packing everything up, moving across the country, buying a new house, moving in, doing my 3-day training, launching the next round of We're Busy Being Awesome. I mean, it has been, frankly, nonstop around here for the last several months. I mean, I've loved it. It's been amazing. And I am ready to recharge for a little bit. So I actually told my VA, when I come to you with a new idea halfway through July, tell me that I can't start it until August. I need to do less right now. I want a month to recharge before I start the next new adventure. And I'd really love your help in monitoring that, right? That's what I asked my VA to help me with. Again, I know myself well. I'm going to take a week or 2. I'll recharge for a little bit and then I'll have that next new idea. And I'm like, oh, let's do this now. And this isn't bad, but I also know that I want to be doing less right now. I want more space so that I can actually enjoy all these things that I've worked hard to create. And by making that intention clear for myself, and then also recruiting my VA for that support, I know I can help make that happen. So what about you? What do you want less of right now? And then once we know what we want more of, and what we want less of in our lives, the last question that I encourage you to ask yourself in this review process is, in order to honor what I want more of in my life over the next 6 months, what is one tiny step forward that I can take today in making that happen? What is one small action that I can take to help me honor what I've discovered in this review? For example, I know that I want to spend more time with my family now that I'm in Minnesota, right? That's one thing that I want more of. So one step that I'm going to take today after I finish recording this episode is going to the grocery store and getting something that's easy to prepare because I want to have people over for dinner tomorrow night. Okay? That's one small step. Another answer that came up when I was asking myself what's one small step was focused more on my love of crocheting and knitting. Now, I know I've mentioned in various episodes that I have really kind of rediscovered my love of both crocheting and knitting over the past 6 to 8 months or so. And I know that I really want to continue making time for these projects. And one of the small steps that I'm taking here is making sure that I have a project next to me in the family room where we watch TV. So that way I can easily grab whatever the project is that I'm working on rather than scrolling my phone at night after we're done eating dinner. So again, these are just a couple of random examples, but hopefully they give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm asking, what is one small step that you can take today to help you move in the direction of what you want more of? Okay? And that's it. That is our mid-year review. 3 simple steps. Remember your wins, learn from what's fun, and decide intentionally what you want more of over the next 6 months, taking action one small step at a time. And if you haven't yet, head to the link in the show notes right now and download the workbook for this episode. It offers all of these prompts that I shared all in one place, so you can really dive deep into the questions for yourself. And while you're at it, I would love to hear from you over on Instagram. What did you uncover in your mid-year review? And you can find the post for this episode if you're listening to this in real time. If not, if you're listening to this later, send me a DM. I'm busy being awesome. Let's connect. Let me know. What are you celebrating? What's been super fun for you? What do you want more of in the months to come? I cannot wait to hear about it. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you're ready to take the concepts deeper and learn how to support your ADHD in a way that works for you, then I invite you to check out today's show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/group to learn more about my small group coaching program for ADHD brains who are busy being awesome. Also, have you grabbed the podcast roadmap yet? It has the most popular episodes all detailed for you so you can get yourself up to speed and ready to work with your ADHD brain. You can grab it now through the show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/map. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.